Howdy, folks. It's the Questioning Christianity podcast. I'm Dan McClellan, and that's Rob Helton.
Hey, everybody.
Rob, you may remember from our last episode, and even the one before that. Rob is the smart one.
Oh,
and
no.
I am the dumb one.
No.
Yeah, this is, for example, I got this email from a listener. This is from Samantha. And she says, I really liked what the smart one had to say about...
now that can't be true.
So here's what I'm going to do. At some point during today's show, you're going to say something smart. You're going to be like, yeah, well, yogurt is actually from the Greek word yogos. Right? And so when I'm editing it, I'm going to cut that out and I'm going to re-record me saying it. And so I'm going to come out of nowhere with like some incredible knowledge.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a plan.
So I don't have to do it tonight.
Yeah.
Because I'm certainly not prepared to say something smart tonight.
Well, you say stuff that's smart all the time, Dan.
Is that right?
You're just a sharp guy.
So it's been maybe a week since I've seen you. We got together and had the annual Questioning Christianity podcast fishing retreat.
Oh, is that what we called it? Okay.
It was the first one we ever did.
Yeah.
So we tried. Rob took me fly fishing for the first time.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, man. That was fun.
That was fun.
Tested my patience a little bit, and I got knotted up quite a bit and hooked my thumb one time. But you were like the model father figure. You calmly untangled me and retied my flies, and that was nice.
Yeah, well, I was trying to get you to fall in love with fly fishing. Mostly, my recollection is that I put you in the water and went off and left you. And I went and fished, and then I'll come back and check on you from time to time. But it was a lot of fun.
And I know that it is a spiritual experience for you, so I was glad that you did that. I was glad that you went off and kind of did your own thing for a little bit, and it made me feel a little bit less self-conscious of the terrible technique that I was demonstrating.
You're doing really, really well.
All right. All right. We're
You're
doing, yeah, I bet. We're doing red letters. And while we may do more episodes about the words of Jesus, so I guess technically they could be red letters because that's what the phrase red letters refers to, the words of Jesus. For this series, we've been just looking at the Sermon on the Mount, and this is going to wrap it up tonight here and now.
Last one.
So let's take a look-see at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. And we'll just jump in and see where it goes?
Yeah.
All right, so this is starting in verse 24. And Jesus says, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall." And now when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as their scribes. So the wise and foolish builders.
Yeah.
I couldn't help, and I don't want this to sound insensitive, and I hope that it doesn't. So since I've started that way, you know that it's going to. But I couldn't help but think about some of the weather-related problems we've had the last 2 months or so with hurricanes.
Yeah.
And if you build your house on the sand or on the seashore, eventually the sea and the wind is going to win. Practically speaking, we understand this, but what's Jesus trying to say to us or to his listeners at the end of this sermon?
Well, you and I have said the last couple of weeks that Jesus seems a little harsh in these concluding remarks of this sermon. He gets really dark and really serious about driving home the point that these things that he's been telling them, they really need to listen to. If you just go back, remember some of these radical things that Jesus has said that pretty much go against everything that the people were hearing during that time. Jesus came on the scene when there was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for violent revolt against Rome. And he comes and says to them, no, you need to love your enemies. That teaching, although I don't know, maybe those of you who have grown up in church and you've heard this Sermon on the Mount read many times, it seems like the edginess of it, we lose that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just try to put yourself in their shoes and hear these things in that context, this was not like a nice sermon. This was a very edgy, radical, almost political speech in a sense.
Okay. What do you mean by almost political?
Well, okay, here's a potential Messiah. He's this person that we're trying out. He may be Messiah material.
Okay.
You know, he may be the one to step in and deliver us from Roman oppression. Messiah, in that context, our understanding of it would be, they probably wouldn't use this terminology, but that would be like a person who is running for a political office almost. You know, you're up giving a speech, you're sort of telling why people should follow you. I'll give you an example. A typical Messiah figure, and these people, these potential Messiahs came and went. Some people would follow them. All of those rebellions would be put down by Rome, or they were. But a Messiah would come on the scene, and he would say, follow me, and here's my plan. And then the plan would always involve amassing an army, leading a revolt against Rome, claiming spiritual power to do that, and that somehow God was going to supernaturally help them win the battles like he did with the children of Israel back in the days of Joshua and Moses. And so the people would kind of fall for that, and they would follow that Messiah. But now here's Jesus as, from their perspective, this new potential Messiah. They're waiting on the let's go get them speech. Here's my plan to arm ourselves. And then Jesus stands up and says, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. And if you do that, you're going to be like your Father in heaven.
And he admits not many of you are going to do this, as we talked a couple weeks ago. So it speaks, is the very opposite of what you described, like these false messiahs.
Exactly. And you know, I've said, you know, over and over again as we've talked about this is just all upside down stuff. It's an upside down kingdom. It's a different way to do life.
How frequently would these Messiah figures kind of come and go? I mean, are they? Is
I'm
this
not exactly sure
documented like in Jewish history or something?
There's a couple that are documented in the book of Acts, actually.
Oh, okay.
There's a place where a leader named Gamaliel talks about, he names a couple of them. My recollection is that there are like two that he names. This one came and he went, and this other one came and he was put down. That rebellion was put down. The reason he was saying that, he's saying if this Jesus thing, if there's nothing to it, it's going to fade from history. Mm-hmm. And then he goes on to say, if there is something to it, there's nothing we can do to stop it. You know, so he's a pretty sharp guy.
He sounds like he's spot on.
So I'm not sure a good historian would be able to go back and answer that question for you, Dan.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to get a sense of, was this like every Saturday, or, well, not Saturday, every Friday afternoon they go out and hear this week's Messiah figure?
Yeah. But I'll tell you what,
the flavor of
this would be a good opportunity for you to go to research that on Google, and then when you edit the podcast, you can insert that, and there you go.
No, I just want to repeat back exactly what you said. No. Yeah. But yeah, that is a good suggestion.
Yeah. Before we leave that one, I guess one way to look at it right now, as we record this podcast, we've got like midterm elections are just around the corner.
Right.
Watch your next TV advertisement for any of the political candidates on either side of the fence. They're going to come on and they're going to tell you what's wrong and bad and evil about their opponent. Then they're going to tell you what's all wonderful about them. Mm-hmm. And then they're going to say, vote for me. Imagine what it would be like if a political candidate would come on your TV screen, the next ad, and he would say something to the effect of, you know, this guy that I'm running against is an outstanding human being, a person of character. I believe he would make a good person. What if he said the opposite of everything that you expected him to say? You'd be so blown away by it. Right. You know?
You think it was a trick or some kind of computer animated thing
Yeah, or this guy's flipped his wig. You know, it's crazy. So the crowds that hear Jesus are absolutely blown away by what he's saying. They're standing there with their jaws hanging open. because they've never heard anything like this before. At one point, toward the end of the ministry of Jesus, when he was really ruffling a lot of feathers of the political leaders of his day, they send out the temple guards to arrest Jesus. They go out and they listen to Jesus for a while, and then they come back. They don't arrest him. And the Pharisees and Sadducees say, well, we sent you to arrest this guy. Where is he? And they said, no one ever spoke like this person speaks. That was their answer.
Right.
So just remember what it is that is contained in this section of the red letters, that what we call the Sermon on the Mount. We've talked about all of that, the kingdom of God. And we've talked about the place where he says, don't worry about tomorrow and trust yourself to God. All these things that were just not what the people were used to hearing. I guess as we wrap up this series, I'm not trying to tell you how to use your reading time or whatever, but I think it's not a bad practice just to read a section of from the Sermon on the Mount almost every day, and just try to let it sink in.
Yeah, or at least the Lord's Prayer would be a good place to start too.
Yeah, I think so. And try to do it through, as much as you can, through fresh eyes. So that's one thing. So Jesus says, those who hear these sayings of mine. So think about what are those sayings? Okay. And then secondly, as I was thinking about this, the other thing that I wanted to reflect on with you for a few minutes is the fact, this formula that Jesus uses a couple times here, when he says, these sayings of mine. When he gets down to the end, after he wraps everything up and the sermon is over, then we've got this little commentary on the end. Let me get to it and read it. It says that when Jesus had ended these sayings, the people were astonished at his teaching. And notice this last phrase, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes. So when Jesus says, those who hear these sayings of mine, that in and of itself was a very radical statement. No good rabbi would say that.
Okay.
A rabbi would end his teachings by saying, those who hear these sayings from Torah. Okay. The law was the authority. Okay. The rabbis would, whatever their teachings were, whatever kind of slant they took, they would always refer back to the Torah, the law, as the source of authority. Those who hear the words of Torah are wise, or those who hear and obey the words of Torah are righteous.
Is it like how we may hear ministers or pastors say, God kind of speak through me today, or, basically they're saying like what you're hearing is coming from God?
Well, I think probably the closest correlation would be like, when preachers say, Billy Graham might to use this phrase, the Bible says.
Yeah.
Which is totally a legitimate phrase to use.
Legitimate or illegitimate?
Legitimate.
Legitimate. Okay.
It's, certainly if you're going to say something from the Bible, it's totally fine to say the Bible says. Mm-hmm. But Jesus didn't do that. He didn't say Torah says.
Okay.
He said, those who hear these sayings of mine. And by saying that, this is one of the reasons that their jaws were hanging open. By saying that, he is stepping into the position of authority. And he's claiming that. He's claiming to have this ultimate knowledge of the way that these people need to fashion their lives and form their lives so that they'll be like people who have built on a strong foundation. Their lives won't fall apart when persecution comes and the hard times hit.
He kind of did that earlier, but maybe not as explicitly. Earlier in the sermon where he talks about he hasn't come to abolish the law, but he's come to make it full or complete it. Yeah. And so this is kind of like his, mic drop sort of moment. Yeah. These are my words. And like you said, he's claiming the authority. Feels like a step beyond just I'm coming to complete the law.
Yeah.
in a way, he's stepping over the law, or is that reading too much?
You remember when we talked about this, when he says, I've come to fulfill the law, the term that he uses there is like, I've come to complete it. I've come to fill it up,
Okay, yeah.
You, with the law, you got, a half a glass full. Now I've come to fill the glass the rest of the way full. But then right after that, right after he says, I haven't come to abolish the law, I've come to fulfill the law. He goes on and he starts saying, you've heard it said, and he would say whatever the law had said. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
Mm-hmm.
But then he said, but I say to you, turn the other cheek, love your enemies. So even at the beginning, he's claiming that special place of authority, not necessarily putting himself over against the law, as he is saying, I'm complimenting the law. But then he extends the law to go beyond law to love. And that's what he does with his teachings. But the commentary that Matthew tacks on to the end here makes it really, really clear. I mean, he says that the reason that they're astounded is because that he taught as one having authority and not as the scribes. Some people will say, does Jesus have ultimate authority in your life? And I want my answer to be yes. He claims that. And to the extent that I submit to that, to the extent that I hear his words and obey them, hear what he teaches and I do them, to that extent, my life is being built on a strong foundation. When I waver from that things get a little bit weak in my foundation. Yeah.
Well, we got a lifetime to try to figure that out and build that house on the rock. Yep. And he's given us more here in like 3 chapters than we could probably ever.
People have been studying this forever.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the last thing I was going to say, and then I'm going to quit.
Okay.
I think it is important that when he talks about hearing his teachings and obeying them or doing them, he is talking about a process. Building a house is a process.
Okay.
Yeah. We will spend our lives building. Paul makes a reference to this. He said, you're going to build with good materials or bad materials, but you're going to spend your life building one way or the other. If we're going to put all of this energy into building a life, then it only makes sense, I think, that we're absolutely confident that we're building something that stands the test of time, that's substantive, that means something in the long run. We use this illustration a lot where we talk about, folks who, spent all of their lives working and, maybe they did really well financially and buying houses and cars and all that stuff. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But if that's all you got, then you get to the end of your life and that's all gone. And it's like the foundation is washed out from under you.
So is that what the rain, the floods, the winds are? Is that death in the metaphor?
Well, I think it's life. I think it's what life does to us. So, like you were talking a while ago, the hurricane victims. For them, it's a part of life. Life knocks us down every once in a while. That happens to us, the best of us. No matter how well we've tried to make sure that we've invested our lives and even followers of Jesus. It's not so much that, it's not at all that followers of Jesus are immune to that. We're not. I mean, stuff happens to good people, bad people, Christians, non-Christians. When things are torn down to the foundation, is there a foundation there? Maybe a better way to say that is when everything comes at you, do you have a life that can be easily eroded? Can circumstances take away what sustains you? If what sustains you is the way of Jesus, Jesus is claiming that way is solid. It's rock solid. If you follow these things that I have said, if you practice the law of love, if you do unto others as you would have them do unto you, if you build your life on loving people and praying for them instead of trying to get ahead of somebody else or whatever, then whatever comes in your life is going to still be solid. I feel like I'm so inadequate trying to explain this. Let me go back and borrow from an event that happened a while back. We may have talked about this before. You remember when the guy went in and to the Amish school and killed all those students? I think mainly young ladies.
Yeah,
it's been several years ago now, and I can't remember how many were killed. But basically, he wiped out a schoolhouse full of kids. This guy was terribly disturbed. In the days that followed, the whole nation was absolutely astounded at the response of the Amish families. First, they made an announcement that they extended forgiveness to this man. That was fundamental. They needed to do that because their whole lives hinge on the teachings of Jesus. So they needed to make that statement, not for other people, but for themselves. Or not just for other people, but for themselves. They went to I think this man took his own life as well, and they went to his widow and her family and extended themselves to her and asked what they could do to help her. They showed a resilience. It wasn't tough guy resilient. It wasn't, who's the guy that plays Die Hard?
Bruce Willis?
Bruce Willis. It wasn't Bruce Willis or
Rocky resilience?
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Okay. Yeah.
I can take whatever you dish out and come back swinging. This was a resilience that was generated from a lifetime of being transformed following the ways of Jesus. And when that storm hit, their foundation did not crumble.
Yeah.
Now, that's just one example. There's throughout Christian history, there are hundreds and I'm sure thousands of examples. That's just one. And so Jesus is really boldly saying, look, I'm extending to you life. Take advantage of it. Here it is. Build your house on this foundation. And that's, I think that's something to give some thought to.
Well, there you have it. The Sermon on the Mount, the red letters in 14 episodes of the Questioning Christianity podcast. So
we did 14 episodes on that?
Yeah, so go back and give them a listen. Wow. I need to do that. We don't have a lot of Amish listeners to our podcast. It seems like we ought to try to do something about that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's stupid. Cut that out. So if you've enjoyed any of the episodes from this series, we hope that you'll share it with somebody, at least one person. Subscribe if you haven't already. Our website is questioningchristianitypodcast.com, and there you'll find links to all of the podcasting services on the internet. So we got a couple of questions. Take a look at. First, I want to do a shout out to Corey. Corey, thanks for the nice email, man. And or lady. Corey could be either one, I guess.
I guess so.
Corey, thank you, person, for listening and for the nice email. All right, here's the question that we have. It says, do I have to believe that the Bible stories are literally true to be a Christian? For example, if I don't believe that Jonah was really swallowed by a whale, am I disqualified? It's a good question.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, whale. I get it.
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying this. The orthodoxy of the Christian faith, the legitimacy of it, has never hinged on how we interpret the Bible in terms of what we think is literal, what we think is metaphor. Things like the doctrine of hell are not, there does not have to be uniform agreement about these things. Now, there are some key things some key statements, some key confessions that we make, for instance, in the Apostles' Creed, when we recite the Apostles' Creed. And even
well, I was going to say, there are even parts of that I don't actually say out loud at church.
Every morning, I say the Apostles' Creed, and the belief statements, I believe. On a good day, I believe. But I have friends who would say, I believe, but my belief goes deeper than a literal belief. I can believe the statement without believing the literalness.
Now who sounds like the dumb one?
I'm trying to say this. I don't know. I'm like you. I got nothing. You have to edit out this part. I'm just saying that there is a deep reality. There is a deep truth contained in these statements that we say we believe. And the truth goes beyond historical fact.
I can track with you there. Yeah.
Okay. I don't have any qualms with believing in the historicity, we would say, of these statements. But I believe that the value of them goes beyond the historicity, whether it historically happened or not. So to get at your question, I'm getting us off track here. If you believe, for instance, that the story of Jonah, like many ancient Jews believed, that the story of Jonah was a story that was not literally true, that did not literally happen, but it was a story that was told about the children of Israel themselves and how they needed to extend their love beyond their own tribal allegiances, even to people, their enemies, that God loved. And so the story of Jonah, of course, is about this prophet who didn't want to bring God's redemptive message to the nation's enemies, the Ninevites. I have a friend who says something along the lines of, it's not so much whether or not it happened, but that it happens. Mm-hmm. And by that, he means maybe we get too hung up on trying to debate whether or not it really happened, whether or not, in this case, Jonah was really swallowed by a whale.
Adam and Eve. That's another example. Yeah.
But does it happen now that God tells me, go across the street and love your neighbor, and I say, no, I'm going to run from you and not do that? So
you're saying, I guess, this doesn't disqualify you.
No.
How about me then? Since there are a few things in the Apostles' Creed that it's not that I'm like making some big, bold statement, but I just, hey, I feel like I'm saying I believe this, but I don't really believe that. So I just kind of sit there, quietly for a couple of those statements, but that doesn't disqualify me either, I guess. I hope not.
No. Like I said, I think that belief has to go beyond fact.
Yeah.
And here again, we have this problem with modernity where we have to attach our brains to everything. We have to say that I give intellectual assent to this certain set of facts, right, or this set of statements. And whether you give intellectual agreement to that set of statements or not has very little to do with whether or not you believe.
Right.
I can say all day long, let's go back to our question. I can say all day long and be dogmatic. Yes, Jonah was a real person who got swallowed by a real whale or a real big fish, as the book says, and then he was vomited out 3 days after that.
He lived in a fish for 3 days.
Yes, and I dogmatically believe that. Now, I can say that all day long, and then I can refuse to take God's love to somebody that I don't like, and I have not believed in the message of the book of Jonah.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
Or I can say, let's get a little bit closer to what you're talking about, Dan. I can say, I believe that the Virgin Mary, the young lady Mary, was visited by the Holy Spirit, and through that visitation, she miraculously conceived. And I hold to that dogmatically. And I do, by the way, believe that, as I just believe that happened. Mm-hmm. But I can say that I believe that. But then in my life, I can live life as if Jesus the Christ does not have the supernatural ability to see me through crisis, or does not have the spiritual authority to dictate to me how to live my life. And I've missed the power of the incarnation, which is what we're getting at with that statement.
I mean, it's fun to debate whether something's literal or figurative in the Bible, but there's more important fish to fry. so to speak. The message of these stories, the lessons and the values, we've all been in Adam and Eve's position before.
Sure.
We've all chosen the fruit when we had it made and done what Jonah did. So I guess in summary, it doesn't disqualify you, and that you're suggesting let's focus more on the message of what God's trying to say to us, because those are timeless stories,
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
we can still relate to.
Stories are powerful, and that's how we get these deep truths that come to us through stories. So, just don't get hung up on whether or not the stories were factual events.
Yeah.
And let the message of the story sink deep into your bones and bring the transformation that you need. Go back. I think it was maybe the last episode or the episode before that, we talked about doubt and belief.
Yeah.
Go back and listen to that, and hopefully that will be helpful.
Good questions, and keep them coming in. Oh, I feel like I should say this because I did make a statement earlier that there were a couple parts of the Apostles' Creed that I just kind of sit quietly through. So I feel like I need to say what parts they are.
Okay.
Otherwise, I feel like I'm being deceptive or something.
Okay.
It's the part about born of the Virgin Mary, descending to the dead. I don't know. And then like the line about the Holy Catholic Church. I just don't know a lot about the Holy Catholic Church, and so I feel uncomfortable saying that's something I deeply believe.
And of course, the statement is not talking about like Catholicism as a branch of Christianity. Catholic means universal.
Okay.
So it just means the Holy Universal Church, the church worldwide.
Yeah. It's the lowercase Catholic here too.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's not like Roman Catholicism.
Yeah. And I got nothing against I just wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah.
Hey, I might say that line this Sunday.
Okay, cool. We've made some progress.
All right. Questioning Christianity podcast is over and out. Bye-bye.